The following audio is via a Skype call.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hello. Yes, this is Saturday on... Oh, I had a little reverb going on. My goodness. Well, hello again. I will start off. Sue Minahan with Talk Cosmos, February 9th, 2019. And the title tonight is Aquarius. It's one of 4 weeks. Authenticity and tuning into our frequencies. It's a very expansive, dynamic archetype of Aquarius. It covers such a broad spectrum, and of course, every archetype does. But just looking at the newspaper articles that I've clipped out, I know we won't discuss all of them. One of the factors that we will be covering tonight, drawing in, let's say, as we cover our territory of thoughts, is about the new moon on Monday, the 4th, that occurred at 15, it wasn't new moon. Yes, it was a new moon. Oh my goodness. At 15 degrees Aquarius. And it's potent. All of them are potent, but it has its potencies, and it draws in so beautifully to Aquarius, the like-minded community efforts, our individuation. We'll just begin with our wonderful guest tonight, who is Lesley Francis, who lives up in Alberta, Canada, and it's snowy here, and we're probably on her territory, although I understand it's colder. Lesley is a professional astrologer and author of the Llewellyn 2019 and next year, 2020, sun sign books. She lectures nationally and internationally. She facilitates online workshop classes for astrology. She's an intuitive and created a oracle star cards. Wonderfully, Lesley has humor, the true Aquarian wit. And it's a great pleasure to introduce and say hello to Lesley. Hi, Lesley. Are you there? Because there you are. Well,
I don't know what happened.
Well, it's all right. Aquarius, that introduces the really main theme, that it breaks patterns, right?
Or as things go sideways is the other way of looking at it.
Well, it's true. Upside down. It brings a little attention. So, at any rate, I did do an introduction, and tonight we have already spoken a great deal of authenticity and Aquarius. It seems that you brought up a wonderful added addition to us wanting to be our individual self, and that was the resistance that we might have to it. It's a fixed sign. So I don't know if you want to begin saying something about that.
Sure, why not? No.
Yeah. But we could segue into another dimension.
No, it's fine. It's my typical Aquarian response, because after all, I myself was born with sun, moon, and Aquarius, and so I can really identify with this new moon and what it might represent in any individual's chart.
Your memory is better than mine, and thank you, Lesley, because I think that was what we were talking about. And with the break, okay, reset. Thank you.
So for the people who don't have as much knowledge of astrology as perhaps you and I do, the new moon in Aquarius is really an opportunity for you to discover what truly is unique or authentic about you as an individual. Now, of course, this will not necessarily impact everybody the same way. However, it is the kind of thing that, I feel it can churn things up. It can make you feel a little bit like you need more space and you need more freedom.
Yes.
And those are the first things that come to me. I don't know. And as far as resistance is concerned, as we discussed the other day, Aquarians will resist almost anything for at least 10 seconds. Because it has everything to do, the Aquarius energy is really all about making sure that whatever you choose to do, it comes from a source from within. In other words, we resist being told what to do. I always joke and tell clients that there are 3 signs that don't like to be told what to do. One is Aquarius and the other 2 are Sagittarius and Aries. And so when you have a new moon in Aquarius, you might find that suddenly you're less likely to want to do what other people tell you to do, because you're on a mission from within, from deep within, to find what path offers you the most opportunity.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Aquarius, ruled modernly by Uranus, and Saturn in traditional astrology by the ancients. By leaving a cycle based on governing structures through both man-made and universal laws, Aquarius breaks established patterns, permitting the energy of freedom, just as its ruling planet Uranus spins on its side and orbits backwards. As a fixed air sign represented by the water bearer pouring the spirit of cosmic energy, Aquarius seeks to find like-minded, intuitively aligned souls to connect in social groups for the elevation and improvement of all.
Hello again. Wonderful audience. If this seems a little disruptive, that's exactly what Aquarius does. Perhaps the universe is really working right with us, because in the last archetype of Capricorn, structure was set. We had it figured out. These are both social signs. But in Aquarius, maybe we're going in the wrong direction. We need to get veered back to what is authentic, what's really ourself, because as the mankind, well, people kind, humankind, have to be exactly, expressive is the true sense of people, humanity. Why live if we aren't truly expressing what our gifts and who we are will be? Because this is the 11th house in the whole zodiac. So because we've been the Skype here with various directions. I'm in Seattle. It's snowy. I didn't go into the studio. Lesley Francis lives in Alberta, and we don't know. You might be in many places yourself. But the fact is that we've been breaking and coming back. So we'll follow through with this. But what an example. Hi, Lesley.
Well, if that isn't symbolic of the Aquarian energy, I don't know what is.
Exactly.
If you thought you were going in one direction, no, we're going in a different direction altogether.
Yeah. When it comes to individuality, too, one thought is, which we can go back to the chart, but I've been clipping out articles. Like, this is one that was just posted a few days ago in Seattle. Can we be our authentic selves at work? I mean, that's actually, I don't know if I've ever noticed that idea before printed, but it does take effort to and vulnerability, with things to do that.
Well, it reminds me of a time when I was working as a journalist, because I used to be a print journalist for a long time, and interviewing someone. We were talking about change in the workplace, which is a very Uranian, Aquarian kind of subject. And one of the things that he said to me, and I think this is important to finding a way to be authentic in your workplace, is that the structure of corporations and businesses doesn't change. Technology and people adapt themselves to the structure that's already in place, so it can be somewhat of a challenge, depending on what kind of organization you work in, for you to be your authentic self.
Well, this is true. Another article, which is really great, is saying that and wherever it started, because I think Google has been pretty liberal with their employees, but they're realizing, according to this, that businesses are understanding that people have different body rhythms. And so they're being encouraged to work at the timing, the zone timing that works for their body. Now, I don't know if that's extreme. Like if you're not an 8 o'clock person, you can come in at 10. What if you're like a late person? You want to come in at 2 o'clock and work till evening, or even a midnight person. But that would.
Well, all of that seems to indicate to me that we really are in a time where the idea of what is traditional is constantly being challenged over and over and over again, and it's going to be interesting to see, sort of what happens as this year we deal with again, Saturn and Pluto. Are we going to transform structures? Are we going to find new ways to build structures that are more reflective of where we are in time and space now? And of course, Uranus is going to move into Taurus, and really, once again, the message is going to be the same in a way, because it's an Earth sign. So we need to. Geez, my brain is not working.
Well, that's okay, because it is happening in March. It's going just to advise. Yes, I'm with you, right?
And so this new moon in Aquarius, just before Uranus makes its way back into Taurus to stay for 7 years, it is a really powerful time for people to really set an intention about how they wish change to start to function in their life as they shift into a new 7-year journey.
Yeah, I think the key here that you've introduced, which is really helpful, is awareness that changes are imminent. I mean, that is a cycle of the universe, but right now, as whether you look at charts such as we are, or just the world at large, change is the code. It is deep change. So, as you say, setting up some kind of intention really prepares a person to welcome it, rather than just the sudden break like we had here with our whole system. Because and well, I keep flipping over to the chart, but really, because when you say change, there's Pluto there of Metamorphosis really squaring the conjunction of sudden changes and direction, and it's looking at examples of. I think networking really is a huge part of this helpful part, because doing it by yourself is the beginning, the individuality, but then finding other people. And there's so many examples that I see. For instance, there's developments where people banded together. There's a community center here in Seattle where, because we have such growth, they want to buy it. The city does, and the people are working to avert that.
Well, I think that the other thing we need, Aquarius is really about, Aquarius and Pisces are both about universality, right?
Yes.
And so right now we are being challenged over and over again to not just change, but to grow. I mean, sometimes, as an Aquarian, I always thought that change and growth were the same thing. But many moons ago, I heard someone say, change is inevitable, growth is optional.
That's perfect. That is so true. Because changing can just be like rearranging your furniture or something like that sort. But,
I thought of the deck chairs on the Titanic is what I thought.
Oh, boy.
Well, because sometimes it may feel like that, when change hits our lives, and we try to hang on for dear life to the things that we know and we're comfortable with is a natural response. However, at some point, there is the need, and this is what I always describe Uranus as the stick of dynamite in the dam of your life.
Well, the flood is there for a lot of purposes. I mean, either the dam or the flood, because looking at this and speaking astrologically, it's Uranus has been squaring the nodes, which are our past, that collective karma coming into and going forward, trying to change. And that brings to mind that the institutions, which we've talked about, and people keep bringing up because it is so prevalent, about those being shifted, but and authorities and leaderships and so many, but it's bringing in that direction of our sensitivities and when you say the dam, it makes me think of flooding, like tears breaking down, and that can be part of it too, but bringing in more that caring, nurturing sensitivity. I'm thinking of the Cancer archetype of the North Node. To help us grow. That's what I'm thinking of.
Well, in short, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I find that for me, as Uranus gets into the very last degree of Aries, which is going to be in for about 2.5 weeks, sometime. Yeah. I'm thinking or feeling that what comes next is a time and a period where if there are things that you really need to express or move forward in terms of your individuality, your Uranus and Aries, I go my own way, I do my own thing, and so your Uranus and Aries has been an interesting journey for the last 7 to 8 years for most people. But for me, the 29th degree always it's like one foot on the brake and the other foot on the gas pedal. So you're ready to shift into something new, but there are things that need to be tidied up before you can move on. And so the key would be wherever it happens to fall in your chart, if you're feeling this drive and yet this reservation churning up inside you about how to move forward, gracefully, re-energized, because Uranus and Aries is very energizing. There's no doubt about that. And so there's going to be some tenseness, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of where we're at, but
no, it's good.
Mercury is about to go retrograde in Pisces as well, and so it's an interesting process. It's going to feel a lot like swimming in the deep end without a flotation device. No, and not necessarily. This is more of an inner process, if that makes any sense.
Well, it does, because of new directions. With Aries, is that what you're thinking of? I mean, it's always a new direction, and.
Well, what would I like to conquer next? Except now you've done the conquering and the initiating, and as Uranus goes into Taurus, you have to figure out how you're going to ground all this new stuff that you've initiated.
I can well identify. I'm going into all of us have projects, I'm sure, or many of us do, right? Exactly. And with some of the energies, Jupiter of consciousness wanting to expand, it's really how to tailor it at the same point and make it, as you say, grounded, practical. All these colliding
thoughts, ideas.
Yes. On a personal note, it is very personal, and on a social, because it is that social sector again. Well, the freedom that it requires is really essential, and sometimes there's ways, I think, where our social groups, the groups, whether are trying to promote that. Like I was noticing Sweden is trying to get rid of their cash. How is that going to affect everybody? That's quite a change. Or China has electric cars, reading these titles, that have where the cars are going to talk to the government. In other words, we have freedoms, but more and more they tie us into this electronic age, which is also Aquarius. It's really a kind of a dichotomy or an adjustment, as as you had mentioned. So, how does humor fit into all this? I'm just thinking, I think Aquarians have a real gift of humor. What is that elevation, that some decision there where in this mode, it's perhaps a detachment, the broad view goes.
Well, I think that part of it has to do with because Aquarians tend to think outside the box.
Mm.
So, and they also have a really powerful capacity to go to objectivity and detachment. So they can observe what's going on around them and not attach a judgment to it one way or the other, but find, like, often I have to tell you, I find a lot of what humans to do to be amusing, but not in a making fun of, but more in a case of delight. And often when I giggle at something, people are a little offended. They look at me sideways because they don't really know what it is I'm giggling about. Well, it's just mostly, wow, we're all human. Humans do interesting, strange, unusual, challenging, difficult things. And we know how to take that from an observational point of view and turn it into a joke, because sometimes, first of all, if we didn't have laughter, where would we be? And second of all, life is amusing. Even when it's not amusing, it's still amusing, if you know what I mean.
It is. And in fact, I think it's been told that the heart exercises, that the laughter exercises the heart, and there's fewer muscles that get used in your face when you smile versus frowning. And so, I mean, in some ways it's easier, right? And I think Isaac in the Bible, just as far as kind of a reference of that is very of great importance to many, many people in this world, without saying how I am with the Bible, but Isaac means laughter. And I thought, my goodness, that's so amazing to have,
Oh, I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I thought, well, then we got to find the funny bone somewhere. There's exactly, kind of elevate. And I know too, the ancients would say that laughter broke things up. So I guess it helps. There is a book that is inventive comedy, and this really, what was the name of this book? It's called We Are Family. And this is essentially a book that has that perspective of looking at his own family. Like he said, I spoke my first word at 5 months, and it goes on at any rate. But the point was, I think he had to live life a little bit independently. And so bringing it to, yes, joy.
Well, and they're very much connected, and it reminds me of, I think the man's name was Norman Cousins, who had cancer and essentially cured himself by watching comedy every day. I'm sure that wasn't the only mode of treatment that he had, but he decided that he was going to find a way to laugh about life every day. And I try to practice that myself as much as I can, because there is I'm sure you can go anywhere and find all the descriptions of what happens, the chemistry in your brain and your whole consciousness, but it's just, honestly, it's just fun. And it's fun to laugh. It's fun to find something in your life to laugh about, even if in this particular moment you're not making fun of yourself, but having the capacity to say things about yourself that are true, that are also funny.
Yeah, lighthearted. In
Yes,
fact,
that's it.
yes. And in fact, that reminds me, years back, I saw that, I hope this is right, that in Norway, I have some heritage. My dad was born in Norway. So, of course, I look at that and say, oh, that's interesting. But there they actually have doctors that are for humor, I think. Yeah. And,
Well, considering that they live even further north
oh,
than
my
where
goodness.
I live, and a fellow astrologer that we know that will be at NORWAC, she commented when I posted something on Facebook about how cold it was. She said it was -50 where she is.
Oh,
So I can understand why in Norway they might have doctors that specialize in humor.
oh, good point. Good point. Yeah.
Because I think that, and maybe it's a function of circumstance as well. I think that the capacity to be able to laugh and is really important in moments of either physical darkness, emotional darkness.
Yeah. And I have said too, I've heard that the brain doesn't know the difference between authentic laughter and fake laughter. I know at one time in my life I had a lot of issues going on. This is many years ago. And having read that, I went, ha, ha, ha. You know, for enough days that finally I started laughing, So we'll take a break, an official break, and we'll return to Talk Cosmos with Lesley Francis in Alberta and myself. Thank you.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Aquarius, ruled modernly by Uranus and Saturn in traditional astrology by the ancients. By leaving a cycle based on governing structures through both man-made and universal laws, Aquarius breaks established patterns, permitting the energy of freedom, just as its ruling planet Uranus spins on its side and orbits backwards. As a fixed air sign represented by the water bearer pouring the spirit of cosmic energy, Aquarius seeks to find like-minded, intuitively aligned souls to connect in social groups for the elevation and improvement of all.
Celebrate your star energy blessings. Schedule a natal astrology chart consultation with Talk Cosmos host Sue Rose Minahan. You'll learn to better understand what personally fuels your soul's seed direction. Sue focuses on your questions to connect you into your unique heart's desire and your true soul path's birth essence, including a recording and a copy of your chart. Schedule by emailing info@talkcosmos.com. That's info@talkcosmos.com.
Hello, this is Dr. Judith Safrir. I'm a holistic psychiatrist in the Boston area and an evolutionary astrologer. And you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the meaningfulness of our roots in the stars.
Organic, free range, and fresh daily. Alternative Talk 1150.
Hello, hello again. This is February 9th, 2019. And it's Sue Rose Minahan on Talk Cosmos speaking with Lesley Francis, who the author of Llewellyn 2019 and 20 sun sign books, and an astrologer of many merits and for many years. So we've been discussing so many aspects and of Aquarius, and there's a few points that we brought up, and we'll see where we can go with it, and that is with some of the shadow sides, which might be the resistance that was first brought up, being a fixed sign, and being so strongly attached to individuation, my own way, like Sinatra's song, yes.
Yeah, I did it my way. Well, I find that, sorry about that.
No, it's that time of year. I sympathize.
I find that a lot of the resistance has to do with if an Aquarian feels like they're constantly being told what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, they're going to dig their feet in no matter what other people are suggesting. Because sometimes I speak for myself as well, sometimes we can take a suggestion as an order. Many moons ago, I happened to have a psychologist and was working through some stuff around post-traumatic stress disorder. And I had a friend who was also an Aquarian who said she was so glad that her therapist gave her homework. And my response was, homework? And so I happened to mention this to my psychologist the next time I saw her. And interestingly enough, her birthday was the same day as mine, just not the same year. And so she said, well, you'll notice, Lesley, that I never give you homework. I only give you suggestions. And it was so true, because we need to feel, again, the desire, the capacity to carve out our own path. Now, and sometimes that makes us stubborn and immovable, and we refuse to hear what others have to say, no matter what it is, because we can't if once we make up our minds that the world is such and such a way, because Aquarians can do that no matter how flexible their intelligence is, and they will just refuse to move. And that, in that case, then essentially, this is what I always say about that, resistance leads to shooting yourself in the foot.
Well, you know what? This brings to mind, I also have strong Uranian influences. In fact, I think many of us astrologers, it's almost a prerequisite. I mean, not literally. I mean, if someone doesn't, that's good, but we can share it in so many ways. And it's a fixed sign. It's one of the fixed signs. You know, it's said it has its energy. It's after the movement of cardinal and before the mutable of the next sign. So what I'm thinking is that it's natural to do that. But, oh boy, let's see, what I was, oh yes, but the placement of, because I'm going back to the physicality of the placement of Uranus is between Saturn and Neptune. And so we're going back to those frequencies. It is on the unknown path of Aquarius. So really, some of this resistance is necessary in order to be original, in order to find that gem, that area that really is your own language, your own rhythm, your own everything, that whole effort.
Were you going to say quagmire?
Well, no, coagulant. There you go.
But sometimes it is a quagmire. It's just, but the reality is that, you know, at some point you have to participate in the world around you. You can't spend your entire life observing things and being so detached that you're not involved. And so that is also one of the, how should I put it, darker shadows of Aquarius and it can lead to, you know, we were talking before about elitism, superiority, which is not necessarily what Aquarius is inclined to do. It's just if they feel totally outside the loop and you know, like the unwelcome guest at somebody's birthday party, they can sort of move to a place of, well, yeah, you're just not, you just don't know anything and you're just not as smart as I am. I don't think that's, it's only because you know, we were talking about this before, was that when you look at the image for Aquarius, it's pouring out energy, and the description of Aquarius as cold and aloof is really, in my mind, the dark side, the shadow of Aquarius, because really frequencies are energy, and energy is feeling, and feeling translates into emotion. So, you know, Aquarians can be a lot more sensitive than people realize. It's just because they don't feel accepted, they put up the walls.
Well, it's true. Many things come to mind. I'm thinking with Uranus going into Taurus, which is body and senses, it will be hopefully, might be rather charismatic, because if one can get rusty, I mean, not as rusty, you know, I mean, it's like being so even tempered with it. I mean, I think sometimes everybody is one and the same. I mean, of opportunities and blah blah blah, and so one can get that detachment can remove one from just the emotion, as you're saying, but what with, I think, the energies occurring in the next 7 years. Oh, and so therefore one doesn't have use, is what I was thinking of too, of some of those emotions. You know, you have to have interaction. You can't, it's good to be cerebral, but yes, I agree. It is a.
Well, okay, so the world that we live in really celebrates the rational mind. And because Aquarius is resistant to being categorized at all, the notion that, we always want to put, I mean, part of learning astrology and being open to the depth of the archetypes is to recognize that the keywords are just a beginning place and they're not the ending place. And so, and it's funny because somewhere along the line, I mean, this is, the reason I'm confused in my own mind right now. I'm sorry. Just the notion that that Uranus and Aquarius are connected to genius has everything to do with being open to stuff that isn't necessarily always rational, which is why when you look at the image for Aquarius, those are not thoughts that are being poured out. It's energy. It's the energy of change. Yes. It's not. And so I think that, I have to tell you how many times somebody said to me, well, you have Moon in Aquarius. That makes you pretty cold, right? Do you know me? You haven't even spoken to me. You're making and that's the challenge, is no matter what archetypes we're working with, and I really congratulate you on having the courage, because it does take courage to do a whole year on the archetypes and really to introduce people to different aspects of what a particular sign might mean. So as we were talking about the new moon and it being in Aquarius, well, it might be an opportunity for people to tune into a new frequency of their own. Because I really believe we're all multi-frequency beings. It's only a question of whether we're aware of it or not.
That's right. Knowing that intuitive listening and answering to it, because we are part, the whole self has the material and the spirit, which is, you could say, back in the 60s, they used to say vibes. Well, it wasn't that far off, because, life is vibrational. Quantum science has now realized, and it goes on that the energy, light is both a wave and a particle. So
yeah,
and so these vibrations that we have with us, because there's such a tendency to want to fit, and for survival's sake, actually, if you're an outcast, it's hard to be things. But on the other hand, it does take some bravery to go your own tune and your own step. And without that, we wouldn't have boats that went across the water, much less rockets that went up in the air, or much less any kind of medicine that found out how we're, et cetera, all these inventions. And a lot of the inventions are, of course, Aquarius.
And so we realize that these inventions span everything from thought processes like Einstein all the way down to the technology that we're currently using to do this radio show, even though we're not in the same physical location.
Yeah, and that's why it wanted to break. Well, I'll just join right in and I'll shake you up. Hey, I'm thinking, I just noticed this. Because individuality, what would that mean? I remember as a kid, of course, I am generations earlier than today's generation, and there weren't necessarily so many roles. And if one did have a sense of uniqueness, it was like, well, what could you really be? Well, here's one idea. This is a fella here in the Northwest, And he's a craftsman, they say, making music out of a box. At one time, he needed to do something to survive, and so he took wooden cigar boxes, didn't smoke them, he just took them, and then made these great guitars out of it. And he inlays them and etc. And they're kind of collective items. If I could show them to you, but they're quite decorative. But that's just one concept of taking your inspiration, however we want to talk about it.
And the truth is that everybody has their own creative spark. It has more to do with discovering what it is instead of trying to figure out, creativity is a really big topic. There are so many things in this area that it's really hard to talk about, and Uranus is very much connected to keeping yourself open to the thoughts and ideas that come to you that don't seem to fit anywhere in the world at the particular moment that they pop into your head.
Yeah, it's so true. Jotting down. I used to have a file for brainstorms. And the best part was if you wait long enough, society kind of catches up. That I've noticed quite a few where it's like, hey, thank goodness. But there's just, I'm sure many, many people do that. And when you bring up creativity, that's important because it is that access. I mean, we know that, but just to identify that it's the Aquarius Leo access.
Yep.
So it's huge, and it's creativity in a group is one part too.
Okay. And here's where I want to just interject and say I'm not so sure that Aquarius is a group, is about groups as much as it's about community.
Ah, thank you.
Groups are very Saturnian, right? Whereas I sometimes think that community, the purpose of community is it's like living in a small town. Everybody does their thing, and they're tied together by locality, but and maybe by interest, but not everybody's the same, nor do they have to be. Because I think the idea of Aquarius is really to teach us that, well, you know what? You can be your authentic self and exist in a community. And of course, Aquarians are always looking for like-minded people.
Yes.
And I always say to clients, so if you've got anything in Aquarius, what you're really seeking is, again, we're back to authenticity. If that's really who you are and that's what really works for you, then good on ya. You don't need to live your life the way I choose to live my life. Just don't tell me how to live my life.
Yes, I love this distinction. I so appreciate it, Lesley, because it's a much like, well, the fine tuning of feelings and emotions, but it just helps the thinking process. But here, community spells out a vast dimension. So, the United States, we know, has, well, I don't know. The chart of, yes, it does. It has an Aquarian moon, whether it's 18 or 27 degrees. Yeah. What does Canada have? Do you know the chart of Canada?
It's a Cancer. Our birthday is 3 days before July. Ours is July the 1st. Now, there's been a lot of talk in Canada because, of course, the British Parliament had to pass an act so we could have our independence. We didn't. We negotiated ours as opposed to fighting for it. And if my memory serves me correctly, we're a Cancer with the moon in Gemini.
Oh, well, see, and what's the rising sign?
I don't remember.
That's okay. Well,
I could have dug it up if I'd known we were going to talk about it.
Yeah, and I apologize. I didn't mean to put
no, it's okay.
Yeah, because here in the United States, of course, with all this Capricornian movement with the planets into what they call a stellium, and for those of our audience, that means a group, a stellium, like
a bunch.
Yep, exact. And so there's this tremendous energy happening. So the chart becomes more and more evident all the time. But I was thinking, my goodness, not to fight, but to negotiate. Of course, that's a real strength of a beginning. I like that.
Well, and I'm going to say this, hoping that this isn't, no one finds this offensive, but I do think that, you have so much going on in your country about gun control.
Yes.
And we just don't have those issues because our country was not born from conflict.
Oh, that's very important. Yes.
Now that doesn't mean that there was, that we didn't have conflict with Aboriginal people, because we did. Again,
but the reasons for it somehow shift for protection, and I think that is where there's concern.
Which probably has to do with why when you look at all the reasons your country was formed, the symbology of it is accurate. Okay, Moon in Aquarius. Well, essentially, we're really going to go our way, and we're going to do our thing because we're tired of you telling us what to do.
Yeah, and that's enormous.
Yeah,
because there's two charts I've learned. One is in the evening and one's in the morning, and so they flip. Either you have a Sag rising or a Gemini rising. But going back to community and cerebral thinking, like here we are, I like this idea that conversations can begin to evolve from that detached perspective. One does need to bring in the feeling and sensitivity to something, to any subject, but yet how can we, but just to oppose in without detaching a bit, it stops that progression to find a resolution. And that's another thing that Aquarians love, is resolution. Let's solve this.
Okay, I'll have to think about that. Resolution. Yeah, well, okay, so fixed signs always like things to be complete.
Oh, yeah.
Their job is to complete things. So in my mind, the mutable signs are the act of creativity. And then the cardinal signs are all about initiating that process, and then the fixed signs finish things off, and then you start all over again.
It's absolutely, and it's so important. It when you think of change, it breaks it right down into palatable, right, options of.
Well, I think that part of the challenge that we face, look at when Uranus has been in Aries, the explosion of the internet. I mean, it seems to me like it's profoundly moved in the last 7 years farther than it did, and of course, it's brought cultures into conflict, and now again Uranus is going to move into Taurus, and we're going to have an opportunity to find a new set of values with which to approach the bigger picture, because of course Aquarius is always interested in the big picture. It's like, and can get really frustrated with people who just want to focus on moving things around in a known space, because the Aquarius is going in, but there's so much more that's outside the space that you're looking at. Could you look at it from a larger place? And that's often what leads us into conflict with everyone else, because they don't really understand why we want to mess with what they think is a good thing.
That's really important to just to repeat actually what you've said, because looking outside of the known, to just consider that something else could contribute and maybe solve or at least help remedy a problem. And when you think of all the medicines with all the trees that exist that people could find, in fact, I think there's sometimes in the Amazon one tree of its own kind.
Wow.
Yeah, or it's so vast. But it's an important dynamic, and so there's much to be gained. And I like the idea too, bringing back your thoughts of using the courage now in the next few weeks to revisit some of our new definitions, because Aries does want the new definition of something, and we'll have plenty of time to settle down. There aren't earthquakes. Yeah. Well, I'll take a brief moment here just to introduce our next guest for next week to people before we close, because we'll have a few minutes after that. But John Foster is a Seattle astrologer and a certified graduate of Noel Till, and he's on the board as a vice president here in Washington State Astrological Association, and he's a software developer, and I think he's planning to launch his own software, and we'll conclude Aquarius. So that'll be next week. And this week, to remind people, look at Talk Cosmos. You can find Lesley Francis, her bio, and I think your website is The Path Revealed. I just think that's a beautiful website name. And so you can find, and there are archives. If you've come in late to this show, you can go and look at audio archives and listen to the whole show. So we have a few minutes here, Lesley, now that I've gotten that out. Yeah. And Aquarian.
So did we cover enough of what you think the shadow might be?
Well, that's interesting, shadow, because, when you're in a fixed sign, it's not easy to see why the obstacle is happening. It's like there's an obstacle, and it just seems like, because it's fixed in your own thinking and heart of how to go forward. So it is something to bring up. And I think
I've been thinking about this for a while, and that is that there's many aspects to being fixed, not the least of which is you will stick with things until they're complete. The question is, do you, after you've finished the job, hang on? Oh. And I think that the reason why Aquarius is a last fixed sign is because there's a reminder to everyone that no matter what you hang on to, at some point in time, it's going to change, and including your physical body, and you're going to leave your physical body. So it's always so when you're looking at fixed signs, they each have their own signature in terms of how they hang on. And for Aquarians, I often think it's they hang on to being weird or different, or they hang on to an idea that they think defines them and may or may not define them. Because one thing about life is it shows you that what you thought you knew when you were 18, it has hopefully or possibly expanded beyond that as you live your life, because life is an act of creativity itself.
This is so absolutely valid. Hanging on and somehow being willing to morph into another unknown, venture, even though it might be working. It's very true to realize that maybe those frequencies that are coming in or finding another like-minded group, or community, I'm changing my language. They remember, because you can build and sometimes one doesn't know what they want, but by leaving what they do know they don't want can lead towards the next direction.
Yes. Well, yeah, and that's a really interesting point, Sue, because it really does define part of the shadow of Aquarius, which is they can get really invested in what doesn't work for them and what they don't like, and they get into the resistance of all of those things that they forget to actually define what does speak to them, what is important to them.
Well, then I suppose, because we have to close up here a little bit, as we've been reminded here by our illustrious soundboard engineer, that bringing in heart, bringing in that Leo archetype of the opposite, where it is that love and that reminder of yes, we're all individuals, but that's the beauty of it, is that any community is made up of individuals, and to let these differences, even though we may have honed them and elevated them, we didn't talk about elevation, but I think maybe in other talks we have, is the secret, is the bridge to bringing us back from our rainbow ideas.
Nothing wrong with rainbow ideas.
All right. I love this. Thank you, Lesley. We'll say goodnight and chat again.
Toodaloo.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.